Hi, I'm Monica Packer, and you're listening to About Progress, where we are about progress made practical. I know I was not the most pleasant wife to be around in 2015. It wasn't that I was mean, sarcastic, or dismissive towards my spouse. I was just a martyr. I can say that now, but I don't say it as harshly as it sounds. I honestly can say that with compassion. At that point in our lives, we had been married about 8 years, and I had a baby born midway through that summer. It was our third child born in under 4 years. Our oldest turned 4 days after our third came. With Brad working in San Francisco, between a crappy bike to the public transit, he had a very long commute, and he also had very long hours, often working early in the morning and well into the night. With certain seasons of time, he was working 6 to 7 days a week. I had quit my job as a middle school teacher to stay home with the kids, and while I wanted to do that, it was all-encompassing. It was exhausting and isolating work. 2 of those 3 children would later be diagnosed with special needs, but at the time, all I knew was that it seemed we had the hardest kids in the world, let alone in the neighborhood. All day, every day was an intense exercise in patience, creativity, persistence, and forbearance. It took all of me. I felt like I had to be the martyr for my family, that if I stepped away to have any bit of my own interests, to take a little time to rest or to socialize, to take care of myself, that it would come at the cost of everyone else's well-being. Honestly, at the time, I didn't see how anything else could be true. But that martyrdom that I fell into, it turned me into someone else, someone I definitely didn't recognize, and Brad, my husband, didn't recognize either. So while I wasn't mean, I wasn't me. My own lack of self truly cost so much for my entire family. And while you've likely heard about that reality for myself and for our young kids at the time, the truth is that it was also very hard on our marriage. Because when Brad finally got home from work, I had nothing left to give. And year after year of that will take a toll on anyone, on any relationship. About Progress didn't start out of thin air. It began because I could see how much my kids and my marriage were suffering thanks to my pursuit to be a martyr mom. I knew that if I wanted to preserve the most important relationships of my life, something had to change, and in ways that were both doable and dependable. So you know the story. I wrote my first do something list. I began an experiment of progress over perfection. I started this podcast as a way to explore all of that and more. But what you may not know is the most underlying foundation to all of this, all that I began to do and to try, was very simple. It was about putting myself on the list. It was about taking care of me too. Self-care is often seen as pampering, and while that can totally be true and even worthy, I see self-care as a way we respect ourselves by prioritizing our wants and needs. It's about taking time to feel supported. It's about being on our own lists. Self-care isn't selfish. It's what allows us to have a self to give from. For me and for us, it wasn't overnight, and it wasn't super dramatic. But gradually over time, miracles began to happen. It turned out being on my own list didn't hurt the ones I loved. It made loving them even more possible. Today, Brad is joining me on the podcast to speak more openly about why self-care creates healthier marriages. We'll reminisce a bit about our now 17-year marriage and how learning to prioritize my self-care helped us begin to heal and come together in our marriage. But we also wanted to share something else, another side to the story, on how Brad also had to make a shift to better prioritize his own self-care, and how doing so, that is what truly saved our marriage. That is all coming up after a quick break for our sponsors. This episode is sponsored by Air Doctor. Americans take about 20,000 breaths a day and spend an average of 90% of their time indoors. The indoor air that we breathe can be up to 100 times more polluted than outdoor air, according to the EPA. Indoor air pollutants can cause respiratory symptoms like sneezing, congestion, scratchy throat, and even more serious health problems. So what's the solution? Air Doctor, an award-winning purifier that eliminates 99.99% of dangerous contaminants like allergens, viruses, smoke, gases, mold spores, and more. Air Doctor was voted Best Air Purifier by Newsweek, so it's no surprise that 98% of Air Doctor customers agree their home's air feels safer, cleaner, and healthier. And we are in that boat. We live in the Salt Lake Valley, which is famous for many good things, but infamous for its smog because we basically live in a giant bowl. A couple weeks back, we had one of those bad air quality weeks where people were not supposed to go outside much at all. And I noticed that my Air Doctor was not only working well and how clean the air felt inside our house, it was also working overtime and automatically too. Unlike other air purifiers, Air Doctor captures invisible particles 100 times smaller than standard HEPA filters. Head to airdoctorpro.com and use promo code MONICA to get up to $300 off today. Air Doctor comes with a 30-day money-back guarantee plus a 3-year warranty, and $84 value free. Get this exclusive podcast-only offer now at airdoctorpro.com. That's airdoctorpro.com using promo code MONICA. One of the long-standing things that has connected us as a community is the Do Something list. The first one I ever made way back in 2016 totally changed my life and actually led to this podcast. And I have heard from hundreds of women over the years from the About Progress community that the Do Something list has changed their lives too. What is it? Well, it's a way for you to prioritize your own fulfillment, to explore who you are, and all outside the pressures of goals and resolutions. If you're ready to have more hobbies, to have more creativity, to have more fun, or rest, or connection this year, whatever it is, make sure you make your own Do Something list. To help you, I have a free training that is ready for you online right now. Go to aboutprogress.com/DSL, and you can sign up for my free training, which includes a video and audio workshop, resources, including a guide and examples of so many DSLs from real women of this community. Again, go to aboutprogress.com/DSL to get your free training. Okay, I've got Brad here. Hello, Brad.
Hello.
Nice to have you. So what we thought we would do is kind of talk about our own just history in terms of where we were at with our own self-care and how that relates to how we were doing as a couple and what it's like now, which is not perfect, right? Because no marriage is, and that's not what we're trying to get at. Like, wow, we leave this perfect life and have a perfect marriage, but in many ways, it's so much better. And that's what we hope to inspire. So I thought it'd be nice to go back to the martyr Monica days, which for me, I feel like we're at their peak in 2015. Now, I will say like that martyrdom does sneak up too, like it just pops up here and there, but that's when I really feel like I was bound by that martyrdom of feeling like if I put myself on my list, everyone else will suffer. And what happened is everyone suffered. So I wanted to get your perspective first on what life was like back in 2015, like as a family and within our marriage too.
Sure. I think
Your
the main
perspective.
I think the main thing is going back 10 years is we had 3 very young kids. They were all 4 and younger, and so they needed our help in doing everything. They were at the phase where, they weren't getting dressed, they weren't making their lunches, they weren't able to entertain themselves, so we found ourselves basically needing to take care of 100% of their needs. And on top of that, I was also working a lot at
Yeah.
the time. And, our third was born in the middle of 2015 and was, so we were going through the newborn phase, and I wasn't very accessible. I wasn't around. for a good chunk of the year, I was working 6 days a week and then did a job change partway through the year, which we anticipated, meaning I'd be able to have more work-life balance and spend more time at home, and that didn't happen.
Yep.
And so we felt like, or I feel like for you, it was managing the home, managing the children, not having a ton of support from me, and just having all that stress of basically running the show and not having any you time, not having any of your own desires and needs and wants fulfilled because you were taking care of everyone else.
Mhm. Yeah, that definitely lays the scene out for sure. I'm curious how it felt though for you. Like, did you sense a shift in me? I feel like it's probably so gradual. It wasn't like this dramatic, like, whoa, you're totally different. But did you have like any moments where you're like, this isn't good, or I should I be worried, or I am worried?
Well, I feel like part of it was just maybe I tried to attribute the moments of stress and the moments where I could tell that you were dealing with a lot on the fact that we had just had a newborn. So it's like, oh yeah, of course we have a newborn kid, so of course Monica is going to feel this way, or is going to feel this burden, feel this stress. But maybe I think that I felt it a little more maybe towards the end of the year as I was in this new job, and I realized that, I was expecting to be home by certain times and I wasn't. And a lot of it was just unpredictable where I would think and I would commit to you like, "Oh yeah, I'm going to be home by by this time tonight," and then all of a sudden it's 2 hours later and I'm still in the office, and maybe and a lot of times I think I hadn't communicated that to you, so you're just sitting there expecting me to arrive home at any moment, which I had, you know, promised or communicated, and I'm not even reaching out to let you know, like, "Oh yeah, by the way, I'm still like 2 or 3 hours away from being home." And so you go from thinking like I just need to hold on for another like 30 minutes until Brad gets home and then we can share the load, to you still have everything on your plate for 3, 4 more hours, and just managing that expectation, that's just tough.
Yeah. Yeah, that's bringing back some memories for sure, like different scenarios where it was like, could you have let me know that you weren't going to come? But I think you felt so bad about not being able to come. It like was one of those things that it was um almost like easier to pretend it wasn't happening, or
Right, but
s-
it was also a
wasn't like you being negligent.
right, but it also was a poor shifting of priorities on my part. I was much more concerned about keeping work happy than I was keeping you happy, which is a terrible thing to say out loud. But I was just more concerned about ensuring that I was taking care of business at work, and that everyone was happy with my performance and happy with my deliverables, more so than ensuring my wife was happy with the way that our family was going in our marriage, and that I was making sure that she was taken care of. It was a really uh, poor shifting of priorities on my part.
Well, I mean, I don't want to get this all to like Brad's a bad guy, because you absolutely weren't. I think that's something you learn in a marriage, is how to communicate better on both sides, right? Until, before it was like probably building up resentment, and then me exploding and like, I never get time to myself while I slam the door and go on a run when you're supposed to be at work or something else like that. I can think of that's a martyr moment for sure. I think probably another martyr moment was like our anniversary, and how you had to go to work that day, or you weren't supposed to work and then all of a sudden you had. Do you remember that moment?
Mhm. Yeah, no,
Yeah,
I was expecting to have some time off during the holidays, and then all of a sudden.
because we got married December 28th.
Right, and
So,
so we're
yeah,
like, "Oh, okay, we're gonna have some time off for the holidays and be able
like
to
finally have some
do
time.
something for our anniversary," and then all of a sudden I realized, "Oh, no, I think I may have to go in and work that whole week." And it was unexpected and something that I just accepted once I got email communication. I'm like, "Oh, never mind, I'm going in tomorrow and for the whole week." And I just remember you walking away and just being upset, rightfully so. Not just because all of a sudden I was having to go to work, but you knew that I could press back on that.
Mhm.
And if that was a priority, that's the weirdest way I've ever said that word, that I could make that happen and say like, "No, I'm not coming in, or I'm gonna do some stuff from home," or like, "This isn't what was communicated." But instead my initial reaction was, I will ask my wife and our family and our anniversary to take a backseat to work.
Mhm. Yeah, but I think, what I was getting at more is, like, I felt like how I responded to that. I remember just feeling, I think understandably too, just very mopey and very sad, but it was like all the years of feeling like I put myself last on the list just boiled up. Like, we had one day planned, just one as a family, and we were supposed to go out for dinner and spend that time together. And I just remember that resentment bleeding over in ways where I just wasn't handling that well, I would say. Um, so yeah, there were moments like that, I would say, but also, I, I don't know. I guess I'm just I'm wanting to know how you saw me at that point. Like, or were we just both in our own lanes, just trying to do a good job with our own responsibilities? That was kind of part of the problem, is we weren't even really seeing each other because we were so burnt out.
I think that's a lot of it just
Yeah,
because we were around each other so little. Because I think that probably you thinking back on the bulk of these moments you were
I was
having
alone.
were when you were alone. Was when I was at work or I was commuting or whatever the case may be. And so you were handling those on your own. I wasn't there to witness them.
And this is funny for us to think about because, I mean, what I really wanted to know, Brad, like, what did you think about me? What did you see me doing? What were you worried about me? But really, this is speaking to what happens when there isn't, as part of having yourself on your own list, vocalizing your wants and needs and communicating that both ways. We didn't even have those discussions. Neither of us were on our personal lists. Like, you were on your own list, I was on my own list, but we also weren't on each other's list.
Mhm.
So that is probably what I think affected us in our marriage the most, is even though I think we're pretty darn nice to each other.
Mhm.
Like, that's just who we are. That's who we tend to be as a couple too. Like, we talk frankly, of course, but we're not a very high conflict marriage. Not that that means we have a good marriage. Obviously, you're hearing right now, like, not having conflict was actually not good for us about these things, and being able to have more conflict, meaning conversation about hard things like this, is what has helped us get better. But that had to happen, I think, from those kind of moments on, where it was like, no more. Like, this is damaging. I can't show up to you. I can't show up for our kids if this is the way we are going to live for the next 30 years. Like, plus, that sounds like not a life that would be good for any of us. So, um, I feel like when I think about self-care, I'm going to talk more about tips specifically about self-care. But for me at this time, I didn't even really know that's what I was doing. All I knew is that I was trying to prioritize myself again. And as part of that, have hobbies or have interests, um, to try new things. And then it gradually turned into, like, ways of supporting myself habit wise, like working in my sleep or making sure I was creative or journaling or day planning again. And it just kind of became this giant, but very quiet, almost trickle down effect of how it, spread out to all areas of my life. But to me, the foundation really was taking care of myself again, um, in all those broad, but also specific ways. So I was curious about what you saw. Do you have any, like, moments where you could see, like, oh, she's on her list again? Or, and did you begin to see changes in how I was showing up to our family, even though we had minimal time together still
Yeah,
for
of
many
course.
years after that?
No,
Yeah.
I think just even starting about progress
Uh-huh.
where you had what you envisioned there, what you wanted to do, what you wanted to communicate, and how it started with the blog and eventually began the podcast. I'm like, hey, I want to have a platform where I can communicate. And you are, of course, a very gifted writer, a gifted communicator. And so you were able to
I'm like, people can't see, but I'm like, no, because Brad's so good at those things. But anyway, keep going.
right. But I mean, you went from, all your communication was happening with toddlers
Uh-huh.
and changing their diapers and cleaning up their messes and making sure that they were taken care of and doing
Dealing with their
so
tantrums. That
with
was
the
most of it.
right, and doing so with a largely absent working husband. Years of that to all of a sudden, like, no, I'm going to be doing blog posts where I write about stuff that means a lot to me. And then eventually, like, started the feed, started the Instagram page and the blog, the podcast. And so it was you putting yourself out there on stuff that you cared about and then engaging with and communicating with your community. And so shifting you from just toddlers to actual human beings, I think started to shift you away from feeling like, martyr Monica, for lack of a better terminology, to doing something that mattered to you and that was meaningful and fulfilling.
Yeah, I think if I could distill that down to something that I think all people can relate to with is not like self-care is starting a platform or a podcast. It's more like self-care is taking time
Mhm.
for yourself. Do you remember coming home to me painting this?
Uh-huh.
Maybe you can I mean, what do you remember about that moment? Like, you come home from work and the house was probably a giant mess.
Mhm.
Actually, I know it was because
Mhm.
that was part of the trade-off, right? Is like
Right.
the house was a little messier, but I was sure happier. But
Well, I think I saw it as, "Oh, she's painting, and it's because she's putting herself first." She prioritized herself and is doing something she wanted to do and something that involves creativity and exploration. And, the kids all slept fine that day and they ate and they had their needs taken care of. And if it wasn't like immediately done, like that's totally fine if you're able to put yourself first.
do you feel like you saw a different side of me in that moment, or like the real me back in some ways?
I think so. I mean, just
I don't
because
want to put words in your mouth. I'm
sure.
curious about why that because I asked this only. Let me just go jump ahead and come back to this.
Mhm.
I asked it because shortly after you bought me more,
Oh,
and I thought like,
I
oh, maybe
forgot
there
about
was a
that.
reason for that. Like,
Well,
man,
no, maybe just like, hey, let's not make it a one-time thing where you think like, okay, fulfillment taken care of. Now I got to be back to being a mom and taking care of the home. It's like, no, you can do those things again.
so there must have been like some shift, and this is what I'm trying to like. I want. We haven't even talked about this before we're recording. It's just what this is
Mm,
how people are getting it right now. So real is like I. This is kind of good for us to discover. Like maybe it wasn't something you could tangibly put your finger on,
mhm.
but were things feeling different? In what ways were what if they were feeling different? In what ways?
Well,
And
I think it's hard to like tie it to that moment for me.
yeah, not exactly, but I just meant in general.
Just the process of more like it felt like there was something else that you were able to do that was balancing your time that was more of a you priority than other priorities. So
Mhm.
you weren't feeling like it was I'm just giving 100% of myself for everyone else and nothing's coming back to myself.
Mhm. Yeah, I think that moment felt really defining for me, which is why I keep the painting there, not because it's good, but because it reminds me of how I felt when I was doing it. And like when you came home and it kind of disrupted my flow in like a good way. It helped me
Mhm.
like stop and be like, "Oh, wait, like that feeling, like that was me embodying myself in a way that I haven't felt in a long time." Like it felt like an uncovered part of me that I hadn't accessed in a while. And so that was something that it was just one of those little moments that made me feel like putting myself on the list wasn't hurting people.
Mhm.
That maybe it was helping me have more energy, actually, like emotional, mental energy to show up. And there were probably things you didn't see, like me having a lot more patience with the kids. I know that was better.
Mhm.
Me not making uh, as big of deal over small messes and small concerns with them, just having more patience overall because there was more there. Um, Okay, I think we kind of went back there because again, I think it was so gradual too that over time it became more things of like how to take care of myself through habits and everything like that. Anything else about that time? Okay, so now we're going to fast forward to what I think is another pinnacle year for us. So if we're going every 5 years, then oh no,
We're screwed.
what's happening in 2025? But going back to 2020, I feel like that's when we hit just like 2015 was my fork in the road for myself and putting myself on the list. I feel like 2020 was our fork in the road for you doing that for you. Do you see it that way?
Yes, I do think 2020 was pretty key and pretty pivotal just because I feel like it was the culmination of just feeling overwhelmed with what to that point had just been a lot of work.
Yes.
That
And years of devoted work where you didn't
mhm,
have any time for your
right.
family or yourself.
And that I think we just came to the realization of just how much priority and focus was on work with, a balance to you and the family, but very little to me, if that's fair to say.
Uh huh.
And, there were years where that worked, that was fine. But I think that it finally just caught up to us. I mean, we were 13 years in our marriage, 13 years in my career, and I just felt like my sole purpose in life was to be a provider and to ensure that our, physical and monetary needs and shelter needs were taken care of, and that was my duty and my mantra for the rest of my existence. So it wasn't just like, oh, this is
Yeah.
what I'm doing now. It was this is the next like 20, 30 years of my life. And then by the time I am able to step away, if I retire, it's going to be, too late to enjoy anything. And so I think I just kind of fell into the mindset of just feeling like a martyr and feeling like woe is me because all I'm doing is just sacrificing and giving of myself and not taking anything back in return.
Yeah.
Which again was my mindset. It's not the reality. But I think that weighed on me and probably came to a head just because I probably was, I was not pleasant to be around. I was easier to set off. I was easier to get like flustered and frustrated with the smallest things because whether deliberately mindful of this or not, I just felt like my lot in life is to work and provide and give of myself and take nothing back in return.
And this speaks to a misconception I think we have out there. And in some ways, I'm sure it is founded, but in other ways, it's less generous and accurate. That all husbands out there just take and take and take. And that they just, like dumb men, just prioritize their own self care and hobbies and interests above all things, without any regard to how it affects their family. And while I'm going to be really blunt with everyone listening, that it has been true for many of the clients I have worked with, um, it's not true for every family. And the reverse problem of a martyr man in the husband position, and I know we're speaking very traditionally here, but that's the majority of our audience. So for you, you were like, you've always been a good guy, right? Very duty bound and diligent. And for some listening, that may sound like a giant humble brag,
But
but
you're the one saying it, not me. So
well, yeah. But I mean, the truth is, any virtue taken too far turns into a vice.
mm,
So just like my virtue of sacrificing for our family taken too far turned into a vice for our family, your same version of that was doing the same thing.
mhm,
And from my perspective, I could see it because I had been through it,
mhm.
and I could like feel it and sense it from you, because I had been through it too. So it wasn't like, what's wrong with you? It was like, I know exactly what is the problem. And it's you literally do nothing for yourself.
Mhm.
And in part, that was, 2020, everyone had a terrible 2020, 2021, 2022. You were working from home. We were all living in my parents' basement, which we were so fortunate to be able to do, but I was homeschooling the kids. And it was all of the years of you not prioritizing yourself, I think built up to that moment of it just being in our face
Mhm.
because you didn't have a second away from any responsibility of any kind. And by that point, even though I was homeschooling and working just like, you were doing the same things, I had learned by that point how to still prioritize myself in the midst of that survival time.
Right.
Like going for walks in the early morning or reading books or having my do something list and, things like that.
And I think another thing about 2020 is that, it used to be, I'd work a lot, but when I left the office and came home, I was generally able to be away from work. And then,
That long dreaded commute was actually somewhat of a break.
yeah,
Yeah.
it was, yes, you're absolutely right.
You
And
didn't have
then,
that anymore.
as COVID hit and, everyone was working from home, many may recall that it turned from you step away from your job and you're done to, oh, the computer's right there. So everyone's kind of accessible and everyone can kind of be working at a moment's
Yeah.
notice. And so I found myself, you know, the normal time when I'd be stepping away from the office, getting on the train, going home, and being done, I'd be, working through dinner and then able to hop on right afterwards because I'm like, oh, I'm right here and I know there's things to do. And it just seemed like all of a sudden there was no disconnecting from responsibility in any form.
Well, yeah, because any second you did have that wasn't on a computer, we were all right there. And I was homeschooling the kids. So
Mhm.
you would like try to help someone with math or help make lunch that day or like put clothes on a naked toddler. Like, So there were no breaks, but I was better at somehow taking those, right? But you were not in that practice. And I think that's where we hit the wall.
Mhm. And I think, yeah, it just got to the point where there was nothing that I was doing for myself, and that was, to your point, it was a virtue that had become a vice. That being a good guy by serving others and trying to do
And sacrifice.
sacrifice in the end, like, does not help
Yeah.
anyone. Like, you think it does, and you think that, like, as long as I'm just being completely selfless in servitude, it ends up blowing up in everyone's faces when you're not able to take care of yourself.
And I think the thing that we had to have a series of tough conversations. And it wasn't just 2020, right? It was
Mhm.
2020. It was a couple times in 2020. Actually, it was a couple times probably in 2018, and then it was a couple times in 2021. Because that's what it takes, right? To
Yeah.
really figure things out. But what was
And
the turning point for you?
well,
Or
I was gonna say, I think it's okay to say that the conversations, and you kind of alluded that to them earlier, is when you have just honest, blunt conversations of, like, proceeding forward like this in perpetuity doesn't work. Like,
yeah.
we do not want to be like this forever, or
Mhm.
even be like this another year,
Yeah.
another couple of months, and so that helps put it in context for us of, like, we need to make a change. We can't keep doing things the same way because we're not happy like this. We know that we have greater potential in our marriage and in our family and the ability to be happy, and it's not gonna happen if we are martyrs, if we're good guys, if we're not prioritizing ourselves and ensuring that we are doing okay individually, we can't do well collectively.
Um, and who said that?
You.
Okay. The reason I bring that up is because I've already shared, like, we're not a high conflict couple,
Mhm,
but bringing that up and repeatedly, um, was the most loving thing I could do for our marriage.
mhm.
Is like force you to take a look at something that for many people out there would be like, what are you complaining about? I'm like, you're too much of a good guy, and that's hurting us. And I'm sure there may have been a part of you then, not so much now, but maybe not. I don't know. Where you
Well
could feel defensive to that. Like, what do you mean? I'm like doing everything right. So how is this not good enough for you?
I think that's exactly why I needed to hear it, because that was my reaction and my response of, like, I'm doing everything that I think I should be doing, and it's all for you and it's all for the family. I needed you to be able to bring me to that reality so that I could realize, like, no, it's not that's not what's needed.
Well, and I think it was us having to talk about how being a quote unquote good guy in this way was actually hurting us all,
Right,
right? That being the good guy who always sacrifices, never takes time for himself, never asks me, Monica, for anything, was actually hurting us all.
right. I needed to hear that.
So I feel like one word could distill all of how it felt for me when I was in the thick of it, for you when you were in the thick of it, what I'm sure you felt from me, what I felt from you. And it's resentment.
Mhm,
Like how even nobody had to say it, it could be felt,
mhm.
right?
Right. No, I think that's totally true.
And I think that honestly was what made me have those conversations is you're doing all the right things, but not for the right reasons.
Mhm,
It's about, being the good guy instead of actually being yourself.
mhm.
So anyway, thanks for sharing about that because those are tough conversations.
Right, but they're important.
And it's also indicative of how we take on challenges and I think that's how we balance each other out. I'm a little
Mhm.
bit more grab the bull by its horns and you're a little bit more, let's just run away from the bull and pretend it doesn't find us. But then we come and meet in the middle and work on it.
Mhm.
And gradually that became about you prioritizing yourself. So in the beginning, what did that look like or not look like via
I
self-care?
think at first, and this was where you were just so helpful, it was giving myself permission to put myself first, and that
And I feel like even that word is triggering for people because they think putting yourself first means you don't have anything else on your list, right?
right.
But yeah, but I hear what you're saying.
I
Putting
th
yourself even, on
I
there.
think it had to be worded that way because of how I
How off the list you were.
Right, that I acted before that, where it was something as simple as like just go do anything for yourself. Like have in short, like have a passion, have something that takes your time, have something that you do that is outside of normal responsibilities that allows yourself to unwind, unplug, and feel some sort of fulfillment.
Yeah.
And so it started as, I mean, you suggested
Well,
all ma-
I'll say in the beginning, I was like, please put yourself first, like
Mhm.
ahead of me, ahead of the kids, like, please, like, we need you to be first so we can get you back.
Right, and it wa
Yeah.
and the thing you were throwing out things like go to a movie, like get people and go watch movies.
Yeah.
You like movies, and I in my head and even out loud would say like that does not sound fun to me. Like that's not what I want to do. But you were helpful in making suggestions on like go get a burger, go for a drive, like go do
Write
anything.
a book.
Right, or watch a movie, watch a show, and I pushed back on it partially because, I don't
Mhm.
know, like, maybe I felt like, "Well, don't tell me what to do, like, I'll figure something out," or I probably was still so stuck in the good guy phase that I'm like, "No, I'm just gonna keep plowing ahead and doing what I'm doing because that's how I'm gonna benefit the family," but the short of it is it became running, is that fair to say?
Yeah.
Um,
Which I think you allowed yourself in the beginning because it still felt like somehow being responsible, right?
because it still is work,
Well, and
but
it's also like everybody ha everybody needs to exercise, right? Like, that's something that you
Mm,
should be doing. So, at first, I think it became like, "Well, I guess I can justify this to myself,"
right.
right?
Right, like, I can have a passion if it is work, which kinda sounds dumb saying it out loud, but, I mean, it turned into something good. I mean, we're probably 4 years out from when I first started, like, really running, like, we had done
Like, you ran a lot before, but it would just be when you're training for,
yeah, like,
like,
if
a
I
half once a
yeah,
year,
if I signed up for something, I would get out and run, but and
and you'd go to the gym
it was
to
yeah, but it was January 2021 when I just decided on a Saturday, like, I'm gonna go out and run, like, every week now.
Yeah,
And whether I'm signed up for anything, I'm just gonna go out and go for a run. And so I ran 10 miles on a Saturday, and then I decided I'm going to run 10 miles every Saturday, no matter what. And, 4 years in, I've probably missed a Saturday 10-mile run, like,
yeah,
less than 10 times, and it's
yeah.
usually when I'm, like, recovering from something or I just ran a race the week before. But
And now I'm trying to get you to not run 10 miles just for your
yeah,
body, like, every Saturday. Like,
but
maybe not 10 miles every Saturday,
But,
but
what
yeah.
running's turned into for me is just it's fun for me. I look forward to it. It's enjoyable. I get to listen to podcasts. I get to plan out the routes that I'm gonna do. I get to set goals and work towards them. You get to be outside. I mean, which is
You get to listen to your own stuff.
yeah, and it just feels like something that I look forward to, and it's something I found fulfillment in, and then I sign up for races, and I get to work towards them, and then and so it's become me putting myself first, is getting out and running, and it's been, I think, probably what's brought me back
It
or
has, yeah.
brought me away from the precipice of being a good guy Brad and possibly, like, destroying our marriage, and now getting us to a point where we're happy and fulfilled and feeling like we're on the same team instead of roommates.
Yeah, 2 ship passing in the night
Right.
like we were for many, many years too.
Mhm.
And so, we definitely need to talk through some general tips on this, and we're gonna do that in a moment, but I will say, yeah, I think running has been your main form of self-care,
Mhm.
and I love how gradually over the years, it's given you a way to, with more ease over time, request me to be put out to support you. So,
Mhm.
like, when you're like I mean, I think 2021 was the year I was like, "Please put me out." Like, I don't care what time of the day it is, like, I don't care how stressed out I am. I will tell you if it's too much.
Mhm.
Just ask, and I will take over and just get out. And it's enabled you to you didn't really do that well at the first doing that even. It was just
Mhm.
more of a Saturday thing, but gradually it's become more of like a, "Hey, I'm gonna go running at 4 today." Good. Great. So
Mhm.
happy. Thank you for doing it. So you've learned how to do that more in ways that inconvenience me,
Mhm.
that I'm so thrilled to do because I already do that to you too. And we're going to talk about that as part of the tip, right? But we're
Uh,
going to say,
I have thoughts, but how about we take the break and then we'll talk
yeah.
about it during tips?
And one thing I'll say though before the break is what I'm hopeful of though, is that this running has taught you how to put yourself on the list in ways that can transcend just this particular hobby. So maybe it
Mhm.
can trickle out to other areas in your life too over time. But I'm so glad because I think it's shown that it doesn't take that much
Mhm.
either. Like it, even if it's just one small way you can have yourself on the list, that there are incredible outcomes for that for yourself and for your family.
Mhm.
I mean, because at first my list of suggestions were very long and it really just took finding one thing. One thing. Okay, so we'll give some more of our tips coming up after a quick break for our sponsors. This episode is proudly sponsored by Lola V, an award-winning hair care line founded by the ever fabulous and ever iconic Jennifer Aniston. You know that feeling when you have a really great hair day? You feel like you're unstoppable, maybe more charismatic, you can't stop touching your hair. I've been having more of those kind of good hair days, and that's exactly why Jennifer Aniston set out to create Lola V, to bottle up all those good feelings. Now, with the new year, it's time for you to experience those new feelings by prioritizing taking care of yourself in this simple way, having great hair care products. Lola V's lineup consists of clean, plant-powered products designed for every hair type and texture so you can have silky, shiny hair without sacrificing hair health. This award-winning brand is powered by their naturally derived peptide bond builder known as B Pro 3 bond technology. It's derived from chia seeds and clinically proven to prevent, protect, and repair signs of aging and damage on hair. It combats the damage right where it starts, guarding against dryness and breakage while delivering high-performance results. I have been a big fan of the restorative shampoo and conditioner, and I've been a big fan of all of the styling products from the glossing detangler to the air dry cream and so much more. You can unlock Jennifer Aniston approved hair at lolav.com and celebrate the new year with stronger, healthier hair. As our loyal listeners, you'll get an exclusive 15% off your entire order when you use the code PROGRESS at checkout. That's 15% off your order at LOLAVIE.com with promo code PROGRESS. Please note that you can only use one promo code per order and discounts can't be combined. After you purchase, they'll ask you where you heard about them. Please support our show and tell them we sent you. Your hair will thank you. If you're looking to take better care of yourself in ways both deep and practical, you can't do so consistently without both doable and dependable habits in place. You may think you know what it takes to create a habit that sticks, but if you've been struggling with some to most of your habits, then I want you to consider that maybe you've had the wrong methods all along. Right now, it's open enrollment for the Sticky Habit Intensive, my 21-day live course, challenge, and community designed to help busy women form habits that stick. With the intensive, you'll not only learn my sticky habit method, one designed, tested, and proven for real women leading real lives. You'll also work on one habit of your choosing, all with my personal support and that of a small community of like-minded women doing the exact same thing. Sign up by February 21st to access this special bonus, one free buddy pass. Hello, extra accountability. Past participants have worked on habits from exercising to journaling to meal planning to reading. But even more than that, they've worked on something deeper, their identity. It turns out when you're able to change the way you do habits, you're also able to change the way you see yourself. Join us before the doors close on February 21st by signing up at aboutprogress.com/intensive. If you're listening to this episode later and the doors are closed, you can sign up for the waitlist for our next intensive at that same link. Again, that's aboutprogress.com/intensive. Welcome back. Before we dig into our tips, I just kind of wanted to give a little general overview, kind of a refresher, if you will. Although we'll share links in a little while, I'll tell you more about that near the end of the episode. on more that you can listen to where I've taught these concepts. But uh, self-care, as I stated in the beginning of the episode, can often be taken as pampering, but really self-care is as simple as what we've talked about, putting yourself on the list. For some people, that is going to look like hobbies. For some people, it's going to look like bubble baths. For some people, it's going to look like creating an art piece or leaning into their creativity or doing crafts. For other people, it's going to look like taking a nap in the afternoon or journaling or meditating. Um, it's respecting yourself by caring for yourself. There are 3 levels for me that I like to categorize them as. Self-care occurs in basic ways, in deep ways, and in indulgent ways. In basic ways, you're thinking of the classic boring habits like hygiene and sleep and movement, things that just help you be able to cope in your day-to-day life and show up in those ways. And then deep are the ways that we care for our soul needs. And that's where like journaling or spiritual practices can come into play. Also, therapy is a great form of deep self-care. Other forms of deep self-care can maybe not look deep on the outset, but be very deep, like meditation or going for a hike, like connecting with friends, like anything like that. So it's pretty subjective. And the final category is indulgent. And that's things like painting your nails or going out on a girls' night with friends or putting on a mask and doing your own spa night. And again, we're often just skipping to the indulgent, but both the indulgent and the deep levels actually will act as band-aids to open wounds if basic self-care isn't being taken care of. So if your sleep is really lacking, you're not moving your body, you're not nourishing your body, things like that, then you don't have what it takes to even um, have the deep and indulgent forms of self-care actually have an effect. Otherwise, they just kind of weep on through. It just is still letting things in. So if people need to start anywhere, it's with the basic self-care. And actually, when I look back on our stories, I do see that in other ways. Like I started working on my sleep, as I mentioned, and you worked on that as well, Brad. Once we moved here, that was one thing. Like we talked about, like, hey, make sure you're taking care of yourself in these ways first, and that was better too. So, anyway, that's all just a quick overview. But I did want to share, and this isn't tongue in cheek, even though it may sound like it, and it's not meant to be angry either, although it may sound like it. When I'm helping women better prioritize taking care of themselves, a lot of the women that I hear from in our community, and a lot of the women that I work with my one-on-one coaching clients, have had the same obstacle. The biggest obstacle is often their partner and spouse. So one word to say that is marriage. And this is where we are going to like talk about some tips here, Brad and I. But I will say learning how to prioritize your self-care will require some shifts to your household, likely. And those shifts will likely demand some communication and perhaps even loving conflict in order for it to happen. And as we shared with Brad, this doesn't mean you're taking 4 hours a day for yourself. This may mean you're taking 30 minutes for yourself 1 to 3 times a week. So it's not like we're turning over your whole household, but at the same time, it does require a shift. And any shift like that tends to be challenging. So do you have any tips off the top of your head, Brad, or do you want me to kind of ask some of the questions I had here in mind that kind of rotate with the tips?
I have a couple things that came to mind, at least for my situation, and they may apply to others.
Yeah.
I think the biggest thing for me is first I had to recognize that I needed to make a change.
And you're talking about in terms of your prioritizing your own
And
self-care.
I needed to realize that I needed to do self-care before I went about doing self-care.
Yeah.
If that makes any sense.
Okay, so this is good advice for the husbands or the spouses who are like in that camp of being like the low self-care person.
Right.
Okay.
And if they're being martyrs and kind of thriving on only giving and not taking,
Yeah.
they need to realize they need to make a change.
Okay.
And that may need to come through hard conversations. They may need to hear
Yeah.
it from their spouse to get knocked to that reality. So that may need to be what happens.
Can I tag along to that tip?
You may.
Eve Rotsky has shared about this in her book, Fair Play, that most partners need a change maker. And that's someone who's willing to raise their hand and say things need to change.
Mhm.
But when I talk through this with other women, meaning my clients, the goal is to not like, hey, let's ruin our lives or let's disrupt every part of our lives. It's more about what is the most loving thing I can do. And that means having hard conversations,
Mhm.
but from a place of love and a desire to make our marriage better. And then, we can think about what that looks like. But yeah, a change maker.
Mhm.
And that oftentimes it always requires, I would say, probably more than one conversation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My next tip comes from Bluey because
Oh,
all great counsel comes from Bluey.
yes.
But there was an episode where Chili, the mom, has been, with Bluey and Bingo all day, and then the dad comes home. And I forget the exact verbatim of how she words it, but she clearly is she needs a break. And so she says to Bandit quietly so that the kids can't hear, I need 20 minutes to myself where no one bothers me.
Yeah.
And that's it. And so I think that we've kind of alluded to it, but just ask and receive, like in your marriage, find a cadence where you're able to ask when you need time for yourself. And in my cases, like I sometimes need to get out and go for a run. And it's not at the most opportune time of the day. It might be
Yeah.
when I should be helping with the kids or getting dinner ready or whatever the case may be. And we communicate that and I ask, and then you let me know if like, yeah, go for it. And most of the time you do say, yes, get out and run, go for it. Or like, can we have you do that later because I need help with this? But having that ability to ask and knowing that in return, your spouse can do the same of saying like, hey, I need 20 minutes to myself where no one bothers me, or I need to be able to put myself on the list by doing this thing. Can you cover for me? And then
Yeah.
if you have that back and forth, you're much more willing to ask for it if you know your spouse is going to ask for it as well and that you can cover for each other.
Yeah, that there's that give and take that I think is really nice. It's like a reciprocal thing. It's not one-sided, or it shouldn't be. And if it is, that's where, someone needs to be the change maker.
Mhm.
Or, I think in the years of me waiting for you to recognize that and then to follow through with it, I had to still live it out myself. I
Mhm.
couldn't wait for you to prioritize yourself in order for me to. Um, but hopefully do so in ways that weren't hugely disruptive, but
Mhm.
still more of a model. What else would you say?
Last one, start small.
Yeah.
You don't need to know that your way of putting yourself first is starting about progress or starting to run a lot.
A lot.
It can be just kind of like you said, like take a half hour and just do something for yourself.
Yeah.
It can be whatever. It can be nothing. It can literally be just go in the room and scroll on your phone.
Yeah,
But
and we've done that too where we're
yeah,
like, "I need to check out
yes. Can you
just
handle
for this long."
bedtime or
Yeah.
whatever the case may be? So just start small. But I feel like if you get in the habit of putting yourself on the list and your spouse is able to cover for you and you have that partnership and that give and take, that you're gonna eventually be able to use that time for what you really
Mhm.
wanna do.
Mhm. Those are great tips. I actually think those are the ones that matter the most. I'll just recap it for everyone. It's, what is it? Recognize you need to change.
Mhm.
Mhm. Ask and receive.
And start
Start
small.
small. Great tips, Brad. Can I ask just a final, like, what would how how would a wife communicate if we're thinking about this and that in the traditional way, right? How would a wife better communicate her needs to her husband, like about her own self-care needs? What would you recommend?
Oof. That
Not shouting, "I never get time to myself," and slamming a door. Not that.
this is tough just because everyone's marital dynamic is different because
Mhm.
my initial instinct is I think it's important to have the conversation and maybe you set it up by saying like, "Hey, let's go on a date. We're going to have a fun date." And then we're just going to have a conversation about balance and how things are going because I feel like I need a little bit extra help right now or I need a little more time where I feel like I'm able to ground myself by having me time, but I want to have that conversation with you so I can get your thoughts and opinions on it before we kind of decide how we want to move forward. And so you at least plant that seed of like it's a hard conversation, but it's not a bad conversation. It's a good one and that you guys can both come out of it feeling good about how you can prioritize yourselves and each other but you need to make time for it so you know that conversation can happen.
That's great advice, Brad.
And if you're able to, tie it to something fun like a date or going on a drive or going on a walk so that it's not just like a let's sit down and talk about how unhappy I am and how much more work I need you to do so I can have time for myself. No, you tie it into something fun, but make it known that like, hey, I think this is an important conversation. I'd really appreciate if you show up for it so that you can hear me out because I think that we'll be better for it.
And as part of that, I think setting it up as like, if they're already doing things for themselves, to say like, I love that you do that. I want you to do it. And I would like to do that too. Or can you support me in doing that for myself? I'm realizing when I see you doing that, like I need that too. And I want that too. Or if they're not, like, hey, let's make this something we're both prioritizing better for each other. And I guess that's my final, like, hey, any insight. Let's say there's a wife like me who's married to a good guy like you, but the good guy's been taken too far for too long. How could she break that down in a way that, I guess it's not like the script. We're not asking for a script, but
Mm.
what would you say would be helpful for that good guy spouse to be open to listening or to hear this?
I mean, part of me is it's a hard conversation, and I think that what brought us back was just me understanding the severity of what the status quo would be.
Yeah, we didn't really get too clear on that. I think the way I had to show up to those conversations was 1, love,
Mm.
2, this is how it is, and 3, this is how it will be if it continues that way. Like, and it wasn't like, hey, ultimatum, you don't change, I'm out. It was more like, hey, do either of us want to live like this for the next 30, 40, 50 years? No, we want more, we want better.
So it's almost like what's that dumb
But things have to change
the
in order
dumb
for us to
PR
do that, right?
terminology of like the good news sandwich.
Oh,
So
yeah.
I think if you have a good guy husband, and if you come in saying like, "Hey, like I know you think you're doing a good job by prioritizing the family and, working and not taking time for yourself, but it's actually detrimental and damaging to us and it needs to change." Like wording it that way is probably going to cause the husband to get defensive. But
Yeah.
you almost got to sweet talk him, which is dumb because we're fragile. But saying like, "Hey, I see all these things you do. You work so hard. You do X, Y, Z for the family, and here's what you do for the kids. Here's what you do for me, and we so appreciate it doesn't go unrecognized." Um, but what we're also seeing is that because you're focused so much on doing what you think you should do instead of taking care of yourself, it's weighing on you, and we think that it's hard and it's a big burden for you to carry. And so we'd really like and then lead into the discussion on
Yeah.
how to prioritize yourself, how to put yourself first, how to show up better in your marriage, and then ending it with the other side of the good news sandwich
Yeah.
by again recognizing the good things they're doing and saying, "Hey, I think if we make this change, here's the ways in which I think it's going to help improve our marriage. It's going to make you happier. It's going to make the family better, blah, blah, blah."
The only thing I would add to that is to get specific where required.
Mm,
To get specific about here's what we're seeing, here's how it's feeling.
mm,
Like, so I see you doing, like, I see the resentment coming out this way. This is how it feels on our end. Um, so be a little bit more specific as needed, and also being specific about what you need to see change. Not like, hey, be a different person overnight. Bye. It's like, hey, I need to see you asking me to go on runs, or like telling me
mm,
that you're going somewhere. I need to see you doing things. And I guess at the end of the day, there's probably one other big thing, and it's therapy. Like, just everyone needs help learning how to communicate, whether it's how to have less conflict or more conflict. We had a therapist on about that whole idea. Trevor, forgot his name, but it was a great episode
mm. Sure was, Monica.
about, like, not all conflict is bad. It's actually good. So anyway, get some support that way. Learn how to have
Mm.
better conflict and communication, because that's something that's still an ongoing work in progress, is doing that for ourselves. But
Mm.
hey, we're 17 years in.
Mhm.
Feels better than ever.
One more tip
Yeah. What is
is
it? I'm
girls' night and guys' nights.
Yeah.
I think one of the best things
Separate
for
time.
one of the best things for Monica probably during those really rough years is
Yeah,
when
I forgot. I forgot about this. Yeah.
she would go with two of her best friends to Cheesecake Factory,
Yeah, for like 10 hours.
and they would get their booth and they would be
Stay
there
there.
for hours, and even then I'm like, I was so happy when you would do that, and I think that the husbands were as well, because you guys, it was rejuvenating for you.
Yeah.
And it was the chance for you guys to just talk, and, husbands are great, but girlfriends are better, and just being able to connect and talk about everything that was going on and the struggles that you were going through. Um, I felt like it was a great thing for you. And then for me, yeah, like getting together with the guys, going out and like grabbing a milkshake or whatever, just being able to have your separate go off and do things with your friends. And I don't know, I just felt like that was a little bit of a boost.
I think you're totally right. And I also think we need to do a better job of that now.
Well, we don't have friends now. That's the problem.
I know. Well, I'm antisocial, I think. But also, I did do that on Friday. Brad was really proud of me. I got out and went to like a collage night with a friend, and it was really good. And I remembered. So we'll work on that next.
Yeah.
We'll let you guys know how it goes. Anyway, I think we can just end by saying thank you, Brad, for being so willing to talk, and thank you all for listening. And just remember that self-care isn't selfish. It helps you have a self to give from. Okay. I hope this episode gave you the hug and kick in the pants you need to grow. In lieu of progress pointers, since this tended to be more of a conversation, I'm going to give you a do something challenge, and then I will give you a little bit of an extra homework assignment that can give you more takeaways and ways to take action. The do something challenge is to share this episode with your spouse and or partner. It can be as simple as that, maybe as a good conversation starter between the two of you or something to connect on. Your extra homework assignment is to check out other episodes from About Progress that go really well with this topic of self-care. There's a big variety there, and I think they're all going to help you. But even if you choose one or two, I think that's the way to go. That's all linked for you in the show notes. And one more optional thing to consider is join the Sticky Habit Intensive. You heard about it earlier in this episode. I will likely only host 1 to 2 intensives this year, thanks to me writing a book and all the work that will entail, especially this coming fall as I'm preparing to launch it. Fingers crossed, hopefully then. So make sure, if you really want to prioritize your self-care via supportive habits, and you want to do so in a new way and in a supportive environment and with a friend to join you for free, sign up for the Sticky Habit Intensive by Friday, February 21st. This show is listener supported. Members of the Supporters Club get access to 3 levels of exclusive benefits, from more time to more content with me. My favorite benefit is more personal, my private premium Always Ad-Free podcast, where I lean into the personal side of personal development. And Brad appears on 1 episode a month with me in the Marriage Movie Club, where we take back our hobby of watching and talking movies together. So it's fun that you get that too as part of those episodes. You can check out becoming a supporter and the 3 levels by going to aboutprogress.com/support. You can always support the show for free. Make sure you have subscribed or have followed the show, listen to the episodes, share them with your friends, leave a rating and review. Any of those things really is vital to the continuation of this work. Thank you so much for listening. Now go and do something with what you learned today. And would you guess what that obstacle is, Brad?
Why don't you tell me?
Sorry, we talked about it before I recorded.
I know, and I'm realizing in the moment that I forgot it. So
Oh, that's okay.
I'm sorry.
Well, I'll edit that out.